Hello and welcome to another study of prophecy, the end times, and the book of Revelation. Thank you so much for spending some time with me here today as we cover our ongoing study of the book of Revelation. We have covered chapters 1 through 7 of the book of Revelation, and today we're going to be moving into chapter 8 of our study of the book of Revelation. So with that thought, chapter 8, let's get into this here today. Just a quick reminder of what we have come through and where we have been as we have come through this study. We have seen this, we're seeing all of these events from a heavenly perspective through John, who had an experience where he was seeing all of this firsthand. John was experiencing this, and then he would write down the events that happened, the things that he saw. Now remember, John is writing this from his perspective in his time, trying to describe modern day events that he could not quite understand. He couldn't put words to describe the things that he saw. So John was writing from his timeline and his perspective, and we can really infer from some of John's writing what he was really seeing because we can understand it through a modern lens of where we are at today. We saw that these three different events are going to happen in the book of Revelation. We see that the events are going to be the seal events, they're going to be the trumpet events, and then they're going to be the bowl of judgments, the wrath events of God. And so we see the seals, we see that those are seals 1 through 7, and then we move on to the trumpets. The trumpets are going to be also 1 through 7, and then you have the bowls, the bowls of wrath that are being poured out upon the world, and you're going to have 7 different bowls of wrath. So what we have seen thus far, we looked at Revelation chapter 6, and in chapter 6 we saw seals 1 through 6 that were unleashed in chapter 6. Chapter 7 was kind of a step back, and it was looking at how people in the nation of Israel are going to be saved, that they're going to come to faith during this time. And we looked at the 144,000, which is 12,000 from every one of the 12 tribes of Israel. And then we have chapter 8 that we're going to be covering today, and we're going to see seal 7 is going to be broken, and seal 7 is going to be the catalyst to unleash the trumpets. And so just to recap where we have been in these seals, we looked at the timeline, and the timeline really, if you combine the book of Daniel, the book of Revelation, what Jesus said himself in the book of Matthew, plus some other teachings in the Bible, you see that the final 7 years, also corresponds to what is called in Daniel the final week. The final week means the final 7-day week really is 7 years. It's 7 sevens. When you go back and you look at the prophecies of Daniel, and we have a final 7 years, and that is the final years of tribulation that Daniel calls that final week. Those 7 years, Jesus himself talks about. He doesn't ever necessarily say it's 7 years, but he does give the timeline laid out in those in the 7 years. The timeline is split right in the middle, with the 3.5-year mark being what was called the time of desolation, the abomination of desolation. This is the time that Jesus calls the tribulation the great one, or we refer to as the great tribulation. That is the final 3.5 years. You can know that that's kicked off because it's all going to be centered around Israel. Israel is going to be surrounded by the Muslim nations, the Muslim beastly empire, led by the Antichrist, and they are going to attack Israel. And this is going to be a time this is going to be a time of great trouble like the world has never seen, like Israel has never seen. It is going to be pure chaos and carnage that's going to happen during that time. Now, if we look, going back, we saw seals 1 through 5 that really appear to take place prior to this abomination of desolation event at the 3.5-year mark. Now, how do we know that? Well, Jesus talks about this in Matthew chapter 24. And in Matthew 24, Jesus says these events that correspond to the seal events that John is going to be recording in the book of Revelation. So Jesus starts it off this way. He says it's all going to start this way. Be careful that no one leads you astray. Many are going to come in my name, saying, I am the Messiah, and will lead many astray. Well, what is the first seal that is broken? The seal that is broken first is this rider on a white horse. It's the unleashing of the Antichrist upon the world, the antithesis of the Messiah is going out into the world to deceive the world, to lead the world away from Jesus, to lead them away from the true Messiah. And he will be the ultimate deceiver. He's going out on a white horse. He is the antithesis of who Jesus is, and that is the deception moment in time. That is seal number one. Seal number two corresponds to what is next that Jesus says when Jesus says in Matthew 24, "You're going to hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must happen, but it's not yet the end. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom will rise against kingdom." And so what do we see in the book of Revelation? The second seal. Well, the second seal was a different horse. It was not a white horse. It was a fiery red horse. And this is the horse that came to take peace from the earth so that people would slaughter one another. He was given a great sword. And so we see that there's going to be war. There's going to be chaos. So there will be deception, and then there will be great war upon the world, rumors of wars. Again, it's what Jesus said. The third seal that was broken was the seal of a black horse, and the black horse was famine and hyperinflation as well. Now, Jesus does say that he says, and there will be famines in Matthew 24, verse 7. In the book of Luke, Luke records that Jesus said famines and pestilences. And so pestilences is the word for pandemics. You're going to see famine, pestilences, pandemics, but you're also going to see this incredible world economic system is going to collapse to the point that there's hyperinflation, because that's what it says in that seal, that you're going to have wheat, which is just normal food products. So think about a loaf of bread that is selling for a full day's wage. So you have to work an entire day just to get a loaf of bread. And that hyperinflation is going to impact the world in tremendous ways. Now, all of that leads to what will happen in seal number 4, which will be this pale green horse, this greenish gray horse that is being unleashed, and that's death that is going to happen on the world. Now, why is there death? Well, there's death because of famine, there's death because of pandemics, there's death because of hyperinflation, there's death because of wars, these chaotic events that are happening, the lack of peace being taken from the world. So all of those are happening in seal number 4. Jesus even adds to that, and there will be earthquakes in various places, and that will cause death as well. So that's seal number 4. Seal number 5 then is not a horse, but it is where the persecution is happening of the saints. Now, Jesus again says in Matthew chapter 7 that there will be, they will hand you over to persecution. Who's the they? Well, that's the disciples. That's followers of Jesus. They're going to hand you over to persecution. They're going to kill you. You're going to be hated by all the nations because of Jesus's name. And many will fall away during that time because they will not want to handle that persecution. They will turn their backs on Jesus. They will walk away, and there will be many that will betray one another and hate one another. And there will be many false prophets that will rise and lead many people astray, saying, you don't really just have to follow Jesus. You can, all roads lead to heaven, or you don't have to be, a fully committed disciple. You can follow the Antichrist and Jesus both. We can join the two faiths. If you look at what the Pope has done in the Catholic Church, they have tried to merge Catholicism and Islam in different locations in the Middle East. So they have tried to marry the two, and that's exactly what Jesus is saying, that many false prophets will arise, leading many people astray. Well, in the 5th seal that is broken, that you have the persecution of the saints. They are being persecuted because of the word of God and the witness that they had. They held on to their testimony. They never turned their back on Jesus. They were killed, but in heaven they were given a white robe. They were martyrs, and they would be avenged. They will be avenged finally in the end. And then the 6th seal opened. Now, seals 1 through 5 is the first part of the 7-year tribulation, but we know that the 6th seal has to happen somewhere down here, because seal number 6 really corresponds to what Jesus says. So seal number 6 says this, verse 12 of chapter 6 of the book of Revelation: I saw when the Lamb opened the 6th seal, because there was a great earthquake, the sun became as black as sackcloth made of goat's hair, and the full moon became like blood. So again, these are all things that John is seeing from his perspective, and he can't really put the words that we would understand in our day, because he had never seen anything like it, And then he says, the stars of heaven fell to the earth like a fig tree drops unripe figs when shaken by a great wind. The heaven ripped apart like a scroll being rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved from their places. And all of the kings of the earth, it says, and all of the great men, the military commanders, the rich and the mighty, and everybody, they were trying to hide themselves in caves and in the rocks of the mountains because they were so scared of the events that they were seeing take place before them. Well, Jesus says in Matthew 24, he says that, and this is the reason it happens at the end, that the final seal happens at the end, because he says that immediately after the trouble of those days. Now, what is the trouble of those days? Well, the trouble of those days is right here. That's the Great Tribulation time. The trouble, it's called, this is called in the Old Testament Jacob's trouble. So after the trouble of those days, then here's what Jesus describes happening. He says, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Well, that's really exactly what seal number 6 says. Jesus is just saying what John will say later and record later that John is witnessing. He is witnessing seal number 6. Now, after seal number 6, we got into Revelation chapter 7. And in Revelation chapter 7, it was a step back, and it was pointing back to what was going on during this time, that there were 144,000 that were saved. That's 12,000 from each one of the 12 tribes of Israel. These became, they became followers of Jesus. They became believers. They became Messianic Jews. Those are Jews that believe in the Messiah. And then chapter 8, which is where we're going to pick it up, we're picking back up to the seals again. We're going to pick it up to seal 7. Now, seal number 7 is not really much of a seal that is going to be spoken of, because seal number 7, what it does is you break all 7 of the seals, and now the scroll that is in his hands could be unrolled, and you can look and see what is written, the judgment that is written on the scrolls. How is the judgment going to be announced? Well, trumpets are going to be blown to announce the judgment. Now, picture it in your mind. I've said this before. When Israel came into the promised land, back in the book of Joshua, they came into the promised land. They came to the city of Jericho. What did they do at the city of Jericho? They camped outside the walls and they blew the trumpet. They blew the trumpet. They marched around the city 7 days in a row. On the 7th day, they blew the trumpet 7 times and the walls fell down. And then they came in and judged Jericho, this pagan place, this pagan godless place, this heathen place where they worship false gods. Israel came in and judgment was pronounced. That's a picture of what is going on here in the book of Revelation. When the final seal is broken, now the scroll is unrolled, now we're going to announce the judgment by the blowing of these trumpets. Now, a trumpet that is being blown is a shofar. It is a ram's horn. So there's going to be the ram's horn that is being blown in heaven 7 different times, and we're going to see all 7 of these pronouncements that it's coming, it's coming. By the way, the trumpet events that we're going to see are not the wrath of God. These are the pronouncements that the wrath of God is coming, which means as bad as the trumpets are going to be and as bad as the seals were, the wrath of God is the real problem. We as believers are not destined for wrath. It doesn't say that we will not go through the seals and the trumpets. Those are not the wrath. The wrath of God is poured out. The trumpets are just announcing the wrath of God. When they announce the wrath of God, finally, after the 7th trumpet, then the wrath is unleashed upon the world. So everything we see in the trumpets, these are not God's wrath. These are the pronouncements and the warnings and the shofars that are being blown to tell us that the wrath of God is close and it's going to happen. So if you think of it this way, look at the timeline again. So if we have a 7-year period and we have seals 1 through 5 happening in the first maybe 3.5 years somewhere in this timeline, they're happening in this place, Then we have the great tribulation, the day of Jacob's trouble, the time of the end. This is the abomination of desolation. Those final 3.5 years, we know that seal number 6, Jesus says, after those, immediately after those days, that's when the sun is going to be darkened. Now, that's again seal 6. So the trumpets are going to be a small little piece in here. It's not going to be a long extended period. The trumpets can happen pretty quickly in succession, maybe even days, days that are going to happen, and they can happen very, very quickly. So the trumpets are going to be blown quick. Get ready. The trumpets are coming. And then the wrath is going to come, but the church will be removed by that time. And we're going to see that in the book of Revelation, exactly when that happens. It lays it out and it says it. And there's no other way to really read it. Don't read into the scripture, read out of the scripture. Exegesis, not eisegesis. Read what the scripture says, and it's pretty clear of when these events are going to take place. So let's get into this. Let's get into Revelation 8, and let's look at the final seal that is going to be broken, that will unleash the sounding of the trumpets that are, again, they are right here in that final window. It's the final quick succession of the trumpets that are going to happen. Now, after we get through chapter 8, we're going to see some different things that we are going to be like a movie shows, maybe has a little break in the story and it's showing the backstory. Well, we're going to see some backstory happen after Revelation chapter 8, by the way. But Revelation chapter 8 is the trumpets that are going to happen, the first part of the trumpet. So let's look at this together. So it says this. It says when the Lamb opened the seventh seal. Now here we have come to seal number 7. We have opened seals 1 through 6, 1 through 5 being that first part, seal number 6 being way over here. Then seal number 7 is going to be open. When there was the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about a half an hour. The only other time that the word silence is used, the particular Greek word that is used for silence, is in the book of Acts, where Paul is going to speak in Athens, and he asked the crowd to be silent. He commanded them to be silent. It was really putting his finger to his lips and making the shush sound, and the crowd just silenced. That's the same word that is being described here. When the 7th seal was broken, heaven became silent. And it became silent, it says, for half an hour. Now, the literal words here for half an hour indicate half of some measure of time, but it's not really clear if this is truly going to be 30 minutes. In heaven, we know that it operates outside of our time and space. We know that for God, a day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. So we don't know. We know that when Daniel, the book of Daniel, is talking about the 7 weeks, that's really that's not a literal week. It's 7 sevens. It's that when he says 7 weeks, he's talking about 49 years. When he says the final week, he's talking about a 7-year period. So we know that that may not be just a half an hour. We don't know how long it is, but we know that there is a literal time of silence in heaven after the 7th seal was broken. So even picture in your own mind, why would there be silence? Well, when the 7th seal is finally broken, you have this scroll, and now the scroll could be unrolled. When Paul said in the book of Acts, when it says of Paul that he motioned the crowd to be silent in Athens so that he could speak, it's very possible that when the scroll is open, all of heaven becomes quiet as God reads, or the Lamb of God reads. It's either the Father or the Lamb, potentially. This is, again, speculation. As they read what is written on the scroll. And so why is there silence? So that they can hear what is being read by God on the scroll. After he reads the scroll, the time of silence is over. Then John saw 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them. Now, when I say that that may be the reason for the silence, again, that's speculation, because it doesn't say that. I'm just thinking through it in my mind logically how that could possibly work. the seventh seal is broken, the scroll is unrolled, all of heaven hushes. There's silence over all of heaven. Remember, there's millions that are gathered there before the throne, and the scroll is open. God reads the judgment upon the world. Then there are seven angels that are standing there before God, and at the end of the judgment that is being read, the angels are given these trumpets. Now, again, it's just speculation. When they were given the trumpets, verse 3, another angel came, stood at the altar holding a golden incense burner. So it's something that burns the incense. He was given much incense to offer up along with the prayers of all of the saints of, in Hebrew, the Kedoshim. Kadosh is the word in Hebrew for holy. So Kedoshim are simply the saints, the holy ones. This angel is offering up incense along with the prayers of the holy ones upon the golden altar before the throne. The smoke of the incense with the prayers of the Kedoshim rose before God from the angel's hand. Then the angels took the incense burner and they filled it with fire. So the incense had been burned. They took fire and filled it from the altar. They threw it to the earth, and there were clashes of thunder and rumblings and flashes of lightning and earthquakes. So John is seeing all of this from his perspective. So again, that's why I think that the time of silence was God's unrolling the scroll and reading upon it the judgment that is going to be passed upon the world, because then all of these events are starting to take place therein by the throne of God. The incense, the burner, the prayers of the holy ones, the saints, they're rising up to God. They're rising to this throne, and then you took this and threw it to the earth. And now, once it's thrown to the earth, now the trumpets are going to sound. So this is all the prelude from the seventh seal now to the trumpets that are going to sound. Again, the trumpets are going to be in quick succession. This is not going to be a long drawn out period. These are going to be very quick. And let me share with you what these say and what they could possibly mean in these trumpets. And I think that there's good reason to believe that these are what they mean. So let's look at it together. First trumpet. Then the seven angels holding the seven trumpets prepared to sound them. The first of the trumpets was sounded. And when there was the first trumpet that was sounded, there was hail and fire that was mixed with blood, and they were thrown upon the earth. And when they were thrown upon the earth, a third of the grass burned up, a third of the trees burned up, and all the green grass burned up. Now, John is writing something here that he is describing to the best of his ability, because he's not really seen this before. Now, John would have not lived in a day where they would have had telescopes to look at the stars, where they would have had the ability to see what was going on outside of the Earth's atmosphere. But most likely it seems and it appears what John is referring to. So picture it this way. You have the earth, the earth here, and you have coming out of the atmosphere, you have some kind of a meteor shower. And this meteor shower, these meteors are coming down from the heavens, and they are coming outside of the atmosphere, and they are landing upon the earth. And John says that they look like hail. Well, to John, it would have looked like hail that was coming down. You know, the breaking up of meteors coming through the atmosphere could have easily looked like hail that was coming down to the earth. Now, they also had fire. Well, if you look at a meteorite in the night sky, you're going to see a fire trail that is coming out from these meteors. They will have a trail of fire, which is fun. If you go out in the night sky and you see a falling star, you see these trails of fire behind these meteors that have been breaking up in the atmosphere. And it also kind of looks like blood. So when you read this, look at it as hail and fire and blood, and these things landed. They were thrown. So instead of thinking of thrown, think of landed upon the earth. And when they did, a third of the earth burned up, and a third of the trees burned up, and all of the green grass burned up. And so what makes sense? Well, you have this meteor shower that is massive in scale, and it's meteors everywhere, and they're fire trails behind them, and they're landing on parts of the earth, and that fire, whether it's a whole third of the earth that is struck, or it is parts of the earth that are struck, and they can't put the fires out, and it just keeps burning and burning and burning until a third of the earth and a third of the trees, or a third of what John was seeing anyway, that was burned up. And so when he says hail, when it's translated in Greek hail, when it says fire, when it says blood, I don't think it's literal hail, fire, and blood, because it landed upon the earth and a third was burned up. A third, if it's hail that lands upon the earth, then a third of the grass is not going to get burned up because nothing burns up with hail. Hail just pelts and it does damage, serious damage, but it doesn't burn anything up. But if it's a meteor shower coming out of the atmosphere onto the earth, that would make sense. Meteors that maybe come through the atmosphere, that part of them break up, but part of them don't. And they're hitting the earth and they're hitting and pummeling it, and it sets the world on fire. Now, why do I think that? Because if you look at the second trumpet and the third trumpet, you're going to see that all of these are connected events that are happening in quick succession. So let's look at what happens in trumpet number 2. The second angel trumpeted, and something like a mountain ablaze with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea turned into blood, and a third of the creatures living in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. So again, go back to this analogy, or go back to this thought that you have meteors that are coming out of the atmosphere, and they're striking the earth, and they all are trailed with fire, and they're hitting the earth and they burn up. Now what you have is falling right behind that is a much larger meteor, a much larger meteoroid. You have a much larger, maybe asteroid of some kind that is now coming through and hitting the earth, trailing this meteor shower. And this is also blazing with fire. And you have this time, the meteor shower hits the land, but this one hits the sea. And think of the tsunami that would be created, and the earthquakes that would happen, and the devastation that would happen if something like this hit the world. If it hit the sea, think of the ships that would be toppled. Think of the cities, of the coasts, of the islands that would be destroyed. A massive meteorite, I said meteoroid earlier, meteorite that would hit the world, the smaller meteor shower, but a much larger meteorite that now hits the world. So when the second angel trumpeted, there was something like, so again, look what the language he uses. I've never seen anything like this, John is saying, but it looked to me like a huge mountain ablaze with fire. Well, wouldn't a meteorite to John look like a huge mountain ablaze with fire? And it was thrown into the sea, and it toppled ships, and it created all kinds of turmoil. Well, that's connected to the third trumpet. Now, what is the third trumpet that the angel blows? Again, these are not the wrath of God. These are God's pronouncement that the wrath is coming. Get ready. It's going to be here. You're seeing these events. I couldn't make them any more clear, God is saying. The judgment is coming. You better be ready for it. Third trumpet. The third angel trumpeted, and now it wasn't a meteor shower, and it wasn't a larger meteorite. Now it looks like a great star that fell from the heavens like burning like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and the springs of water. And now the name of the star is wormwood, and a third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the star, or from the waters that were made bitter. So now look at these three trumpets. You have one, it would be smaller meteor showers that are really going out before before larger pieces, and they're burning with fire. They're burning up in the atmosphere, but many of them are striking the ground. They're starting the ground on fire. And then behind this, you have maybe a large meteorite that, again, is also on fire because it looks like it's streaking with fire from the sky. This one hits the sea. And then behind that, you have a massive asteroid that is going to hit the world. Now, the word star in the Greek language in the book of Revelation is the word aster. And the word aster is where we get our word asteroid. So the most accurate translation is probably not going to be star. The most accurate translation is going to be asteroid. It's going to hit the Earth. Now, when will that happen? When will this great asteroid with a big trail of fire behind it, when is this going to hit the Earth? Don't know. Have no idea. But let me give you some ways to think about it. There is a very famous asteroid out there in our solar system called Apophis. Now, Apophis is a tremendously large asteroid. Apophis has already come near the world before, and Apophis is supposed to come near the Earth, and the date that it's going to come near the Earth is April 13th, 2029. That's the date that it's scheduled. Now, Apophis also will come back in the year 2068. Apophis, or what is called another near-Earth object. One of those is what is being described here in the third trumpet. A great asteroid fell from the heavens, led by a smaller meteorite, led by a meteor shower. Trumpets 1, trumpets 2, and trumpet 3. Now, scientists have said that Apophis is not going to come, there's no possibility it's going to hit the Earth in 2029. However, there's a few other scientists who have said that the way that the other scientists are calculating the orbit of Apophis is wrong. And there are some scientists that believe that this is a very real possibility that it could actually be hitting the Earth in the year 2029. Now, many scientists say no way, it's not going to happen. They say if it's going to happen, maybe 2068 would be a more likely scenario. I don't know. I'm not making a prediction. If you want to read about this, you can read. There's a book by Thomas Horn. I don't know if it's, you can take it for what it's worth. Thomas Horn, I believe the book he even wrote was just titled Wormwood or something along the lines, but you can do a search for Thomas Horn, Wormwood, and he will talk about, he had a prophetic vision or a dream that it was Apophis that hit the Earth in April 13th, 2029. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate that is. Now, the reason I think that these are the three events of the trumpet, though, are exactly what Jesus says. And I want to show you this, that Jesus says in the book of Luke, Gospel of Luke, chapter 21. So Luke gives a little bit different explanation of Matthew 24. Luke he's writing from a different perspective. Luke is writing from the knowledge that he had gotten. Luke actually wrote the book of Luke and the book of Acts. We think as a defense statement for Paul as he was on trial in Rome. So he wrote this out as the defense for Paul's going to the emperor in Rome. So Luke was writing from a different perspective than Matthew was. But Luke adds in some interesting thoughts. So Luke 21, he says this. And this is, again, we know this is after the abomination of desolation, because Jesus says in verse 20, but when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then recognize that her desolation is near. Those in Judea must flee to the mountains. Those inside the city must get out. Those in the countryside must not go into Jerusalem. For these are the days of punishment to fulfill all that has been written. Where was it written? The book of Ezekiel and the book of Daniel. Jesus says, woe to those who again are in Jerusalem, who are pregnant, and those who are nursing babies in those days. For there will be great distress in the land and the wrath on this people, and they will fall by the edge of the sword. They will be led away into captivity into all the nations. Jerusalem will be trampled by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Now, what is the fulfillment? Well, again, that's this timeline where you have this 3.5 year. This is the abomination of desolation. This is what Jesus is talking about in Luke chapter 21, starting in verse 20, going through verse 24. So he's saying that this is the timeline where you don't want to be in Jerusalem. Woe to those who are pregnant. Woe to those who are nursing babies. They, get out if you can. Run away if you can. Get out. Flee the city. People are going to die by the sword. They're going to be led off into captivity. They're going to go through this until the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled. Who's the time of the Gentiles? This is the Gentile. That's the again, in my opinion, it's the Islamic attack of the beastly empire that's going to happen. That's the time of the Gentiles. When the time of the Gentiles has come to an end, so when it's come to an end, then you have seal number 6, you have seal number 7, and then you have the trumpets. Look at what Jesus says next. Verse 25 of chapter 21 of the book of Luke. There will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and upon the earth nations will be confused by the roaring of the sea and its waves. People will lose heart from fear and anticipation of what is overtaking the earth, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. So did you hear that? People will be in fear of what is coming, And they will be in fear in their anticipation of these events. So they're going to know, we're going to have a warning. We're going to know that these things are coming if we're still alive at that time. It may not be in 2029, it may be 2068. We may be gone by that time, very real possibility that we could be gone by that time. I will be just about 100 years old by the year 2068, so probably not going to be here and be around. But whoever is here, or if it's 2029, we may be seeing those events. But that would be a lot to happen by the year 2029. It doesn't even have to be Apophis, though. It could be another near-Earth object that is going to happen. So maybe it is 2029, maybe it's 2068, maybe it's some other time, some other near-Earth object. But Jesus says there's going to be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars. So you're going to look out of a telescope, and your scientists are going to be able to see this by satellite imagery, and we're going to see these things that are coming, and we're going to know we are on the trajectory of this coming. And people will be, upon the earth, nations are going to be confused by the roaring of the sea and the waves. That's the tsunamis that will hit. And people are going to lose heart from fear and anticipation over what is overtaking the earth, and for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. So what he's describing in Luke 21, and I would encourage you to go read that, Luke 21, and that's starting in verse 25, and it's going to go through verse 26. Go read that, and that corresponds to these first 3 trumpets that are being discussed. Immediately after that, Jesus says, and when you see these things begin to he says, verse 27, and then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now, when these things begin to happen, stand straight up and lift up your heads, because your salvation is near. So we know that this is happening right here at this time, and we know that this is the time right here. Sneak in that little spot right there. This is the time that Jesus returns, and the time that our salvation is near. Again, it doesn't say anything about a pre-rapture of the church ever. It says after these events, your salvation is near. Lift up your heads, because when you see these events happening, you see the signs of the trumpets blowing, you can say, Jesus is coming. He's coming quick. It's not going to be long, not many days from now. He will be here. You will see him. Lift your eyes. Look up. Your salvation is drawing near. So that's the first three trumpets that are going to sound out of the book of Revelation. So let's keep going and look at the next one that is going to sound. The fourth angel trumpeted, and by the way, this is the last one we're going to look at today for this study today, but the fourth trumpet, the fourth angel trumpeted, and a third of the sun, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars were struck, so that a third of them were darkened. A third of the day would not shine, as well as a third of the night. Then I looked, and I heard an eagle crying out with a loud voice as it flew high in the sky, saying, Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth, because of the remaining blasts of the trumpets the three angels are about to sound. So you thought that was bad? It's going to get worse, and we're about to Jesus' return. So now you have a potential fourth part of this massive meteorite wave, or and I don't know what this is going to be, but it's something astrologically, or it's something that we can observe through satellite or through telescope. But they are going to see a third of the stars were struck. So what we are seeing is not the stars, we are seeing the moon being pelted, the moon being hit, the sun being hit, or we are seeing such a massive backlash upon the world that it's blocking out the night, it's blocking out the day. You can't see the events because of all that has happened. So some great eclipse, some great blocking out of the sun because of those first three events, and potentially the fourth one as well. So the fourth one, again, what did Jesus say? There are going to be signs in the sun and the moons and the stars. So now we are seeing the sun and the moon and the stars, and they are also being struck, and something is happening to them that is going to cause great darkness. Now think about this too. If the sun is hit, if the moon is hit, and somehow they are impacted, then that's going to throw the whole functioning of the world out of kilter. We are not going to be, the world is not going to be spinning right. Maybe the axis, the tilt of the earth has been knocked out of alignment. The moon that controls the tidal waves and controls the way, really helps with the rotation of the world. If that is struck, it's going to throw the rotation out of kilter and out of whack. And so all of this is going to cause days to run together, and we won't even know what days that they are, because everything is chaotic. Everything has been affected by all of the events that have happened in the first four trumpets. Now, the final warning after these first four trumpets is, it's going to be bad, the final three. And by the way, these trumpets are not, these are not the wrath of God. As bad as these are, the wrath of God is going to be far worse. So what we're going to do is, as we go forward, we're going to keep walking through the book of Revelation. Next week we'll be in Revelation chapter 9, and we're going to see the fifth angel that is going to trumpet, and then we are going to see the sixth angel trumpeting. And then at the end of chapter 9, it's going to be the backstory. Starting in chapter 10, we're going to have some backstory that we're going to be covering until we get to chapter 11, verse 15, that we are going to see. We're going to see the seventh trumpet that is going to happen. And again, what does Paul say? That at the sound of the last trumpet, the church will be gathered. And so if you put what Paul says with what we have seen in the book of Revelation, what Jesus says in Matthew 24, what he says in Luke 21, that's when the Lord returns, that's when salvation happens, at the last trumpet. So in my opinion, we are going to go through all of this. There's nothing that indicates anywhere that we have a pre-rapture of the church, that we're not going to have to go through this. It appears in all instances that we are going to have to go through these times, and it's going to be difficult. We may not be alive. It may be the next generation or the generation after. It may be our generation. We just don't know. What I've always told you is, you can hope for the pre-rapture, but plan for all of these events to happen, and we have to go through them. But you know what? The Lord will help you. The Lord will protect you. The Lord will be with you. He will give you grace. He will give you mercy. He will bless you and be with you through all of this. God has always been a God who is near. He is near those who are crushed. He's near the broken. He is near the hurting. He is near the lonely. He is near those who are suffering and in pain. God is with you. He will be with you. He will not leave your side. Never will he leave you nor forsake you, even if we do have to go through all of this, even if we are persecuted and brought before people, even if our life is threatened and if our life is taken. God will be with you every step of the way. He will not leave your side. And you will have a reward beyond rewards. You will have an eternity with him by being faithful and following him to the very end. Never turn your back, never give up. Keep persevering in him to the very, very end, to the day that you breathe your last and you can stand with him in eternity. Well, we're going to stop there. Next week, we will get into Revelation chapter 9. We'll see the next two trumpets, and then we will just keep walking our way through the book of Revelation. I hope you've enjoyed this study. I hope you're learning a lot through it, and I hope that you'll join me back here next time. Again, thank you for taking the time to be with me here today. Thank you for joining together in this study. Have a wonderful, blessed week, and I will see you back here next time.